Hello there. Welcome back to another chapter, so to speak, of Spiritual Insights with Michael Mirdad. This is our Friday night presentation that we do, typically every Friday. So thank you for joining us. Tonight or today, let's talk about something that's so essential but often forgotten in the spiritual community. And that is, let's talk about humility versus grandiosity. In the spiritual community, in the New Age movement, the self-help, even the words, self-help movement, it's been very essential to people's growth to hear the concept of self-help. It sort of meant self-empowerment, or that you're taking responsibility and getting your life together. So that part of it's cool. But with it also implies a certain self being in control, and it's the lower self that got us out of control, so to speak, whether it's out of control in addiction or out of control just spiritually losing our identity. So grandiosity is a term used in A Course in Miracles, but grandiosity is like our just an self-inflated ideal about oneself. It's this self-inflated narcissism that people can, struggle with, suffer from. It's an ego-based consciousness, obviously. So we have to recognize that, it's not just for the big teachers that could run into grandiosity. Everybody that thinks they know their own best interests, everybody that thinks, I can handle my addiction, I don't need the 12-step group. I can handle this, I don't need that. I don't need to meditate. I don't need to do this or that or the other. Even in my life, when people have noted that there's things I haven't done or seemed like I needed to do to be healthy or whatever, not having done a diet the way people do diet, just sort of confirming that we don't all need the same laws. We don't all live by the same laws. When we have spirituality at such a level in our consciousness, it really becomes our guiding force, and the rules, the laws of the world don't weigh on us as much. I'm not saying they don't apply, that we shouldn't respect them, but they don't control us as much. So, we could say that there's an example where I've said, I don't really need this or that, but I've never really boasted it too much. I just say that this is the way it is for me, especially when people ask. I don't say, well, I'm beyond. I don't put it that way, because that's grandiosity. Instead, I say I'm very lucky. I'm very grateful. Just today, I was talking to somebody, and something had come up in conversation, and I just said, they said, wow, how did you do this or that or whatever? And I just said, I'm very grateful that it worked that way for me, rather than pegging it on, well, it's this one lifetime I earned this, or special favors from God, or, whatever people might think that gets us through life. When somebody wins the lottery, or they're lucky, or it's a miracle, and we all have different terms for things. So I tend to try to be careful to not attribute it to something that's grandiose. Instead, it's important for us to understand humility. Now, for me to even address or talk about humility is going to sound like it's not humble of me, because I'm talking about humility. So it's a tricky thing. Some people will say to me, Michael, how do I know if I'm humble? I really want to be humble, and I really don't want to be conceited, or I really don't want to overthink, my needs above other people, and so on. Here's the first thing I say to them. The fact that you can even ask that question shows that you have a pretty cool integrity level. It really does. The fact that you would even think to double check yourself shows there's a level of humility. See, a narcissist or somebody extra grandiose in their thinking, they're not even gonna question themselves. Even in their thinking that they're humble, they're gonna assume it must be done perfectly because they're so perfect, which is not humble, obviously. So, it's important that we understand that we can grow so much spiritually, but only so much. We can only meditate ourselves so far. Even the Buddhist with the most sublime meditation learns to tell themselves, as soon as they recognize that they're meditating, the part of them that is recognizing that they're meditating is still not the real self, because there's still an I, a little I. So it's really important to understand that all of our practices, guys, we can stand on one foot, meditate, stand in a sacred circle, chime gong, whatever, fast, and so on. And you can only take yourself so far. If you're lucky and you do this enough years for enough lifetimes, you could become an ascended master. That still does not mean you've attained complete oneness with God. An ascended master is like the metaphor of this. Humans recycle metaphorically through the lower three chakras. That's what we do. We are in the physical chakra when we're physically on earth. We're in the next chakra when we're in our astral body on the other side. We reach the mental chakra, the solar plexus level. We go through those three chakras in our typical evolutionary cycle. Some masters, including Buddha, might call this the wheel of life. So we go through this cycle, these lower three centers, and the diaphragm is kind of an interesting metaphor because the body is like a symbol of everything else. We can really read a lot about everything by just looking at, that saying, everything's within you. Well, it's sort of literally true. We can learn about sacred geometry through the body. We can learn about numerology through the body, and so on and so on. So the diaphragm is like a line that we cannot pass. Literally, it's a thick musculature in the body that acts as a band that separates segments of the torso. So we run into that when we're on the other side, and it's think of it as sort of bouncing us back, a rubber band that kind of boing, and just boomerangs us back to the earth. So we pass over, we rise, we reach a certain level, and we come back. And there you are. An ascended master, and there are many, you could say Yogananda would be an ascended master. Perhaps some people might think Mother Teresa, Moses, Saint Germain, Kutumi, Eastern masters, Middle Eastern masters, and so on. There's many that are believe confirmed masters, and there are some that you could theorize probably reach that level of consciousness. It's fantastic. And just because you're a nice person on earth doesn't mean you actually just jump to that level. But ascended masters are the heart chakra. It means they've made it through that band that separates the incarnation from the not needing to incarnate, the heart chakra. So ascended masters reach that level, the heart. To say one with God, which means the Christ consciousness, the Christ being not their religion, Christianity, but Christ consciousness, is of the upper three chakras. It's the only term on earth that represents God in its completion. We could say, I am consciousness, but it's the term that we use for a person named Jesus, for example, who remembered that he was the Christ. But it's everybody's destiny because Christ means our true self, our real self. So everybody's got that title waiting for them. That's why I've mentioned this before, but the book of Revelation says that through the time of the revelation, whether you call that a global event or whether you call it a personal transformation process, it says, and man will be given a new name. What that means is there will come a time when you and I are referred to as the Christ again. That's when we're going through our process of revelation between us and God, and we wake up to who we really are. So it gets very paradoxical because if we say, did you know that we're all really the Christ or the whole, holy, perfect creation of God? Did you know that? Oh, absolutely, it sounds grandiose. But the truth is, that's what God created us to be. That's not grandiose, even though it's a big title. It's not grandiose because it's the truth. Grandiose is when you are inflating the false as though it's true, almost like a spiritual version of slander. So we're making things up. I'm wonderful. I'm amazing because I've got this done or that done. I'm amazing. I'm just very spiritual and enlightened. And so, when we're boasting things, when we're bragging and so forth, there are ways to check that and prevent that. But when we really understand who we are, I believe that you don't have to really keep yourself in check anymore because you don't take yourself so seriously. If you do take yourself seriously, like your accomplishments or achievements of some kind, titles, but also, I'm known as a great this or that. That means you're holding that badge up, and that would mean you really don't know how beautiful or wonderful you are. It's quite an amazing thing, but it's kind of paradoxical. It's conceited, it's ego-based to think that we're anything less than God's perfection. And yet to boast that you've reached God's perfection when you're still an ego-based person or hurtful person, it's actually then false. Therefore, it's slanderous and inaccurate, and it's potentially grandiose. So please understand as I'm explaining this the value of humility, because I find myself grateful that when I have my spiritual time of prayer or whatever, I don't say, hey God, you know who this is? I don't even have to name who I am because, we all know that I'm a spiritual leader, God, it's silly. I think I would probably pray in a sense like anyone or everyone. I believe prayer ultimately is communion with God, and I do that. But there's also this very simple, childlike part of me that speaks to God the way God asks us to and calls out the name of God. It calls out the name of our brother, our elder brother, Jesus. Here I am, be with me, guide me, help me, those kinds of things. I believe that the Holy Spirit of God, which I call the Divine Mother, is our ultimate bridge back home. So we have to actually learn to surrender to the Divine Mother, and there's another aspect of humility. When you see people, because they've written books, as though that makes them spiritual, I don't think it makes you spiritual at all. In fact, if anything, it raises the bar that you have to live up to. And if you don't live up to that, oh my God, I think you better try, do your best, because on the other side, the bar you've stated yourself to be on planet Earth is going to be the one they're going to hold you to on the other side. So it's like, man, you better be living the stuff that you write, living the stuff you sing, living the stuff you preach, or whatever your role might be. Because that's how we're measured, judged, as it were. We're judged by our own consciousness. So if we know that we haven't really reached what we profess to reach, it's going to come back to bite us. And I'm not saying that there's a big D-Day, a big judgment day, a big devastation day. I'm just saying you just have to come back and do it again. You'll come back as something in more, even more humble circumstances to teach you, to lighten up. So try to imagine, here we're starting a new year. Whatever time of the year you happen to watch this video, we're starting a new year when I'm recording it. And it's so beautiful and so important. All the things I could talk about. I could sit here and I do sometimes. I could say, here's what ascension's all about. Here's what vibrational healing is all about. Here's how to achieve miracles, and so on and so on and so on. But none of that's actually as important as learning to just say, here I am, God, guide me every day. Just having that humble prayer every morning to say, here I am. I'm not sure what I should be doing today. You guide me. I know that our head will say, come on, we're adults, we're parents, we're elders, we're leaders of tribes, we're leaders of nations, we're leaders of this, we're mature, whatever terminology you want. We have degrees. We clearly know how to go about our day. That's actually not a state of humility. It's a state of grandiosity. It's a state of a certain form of egotism or narcissism. When we say, I don't need God's input, it actually already confirms how screwed up we are. When we can say, as much as I think I know, I think I'm going to stay open. I can be a brain surgeon, studied really well, be really acclaimed, but I would still want to start every surgery with, I don't know anything, God, you guide me. Because you obviously know something, you know skills, but what it means is, if there's something I've missed, show me. If there's something more relevant than my intellectual mind. I mean, amongst the spiritual people, you hear a lot of people say, get out of the head. Well, this would be a good time to practice that. Instead of just spouting those words, it's a good time to practice. Get out of your head. Meaning, stop thinking that you know the best thing to do in any given circumstance or situation. So I really believe in the value of humility. And humility is often seen, blessed are the meek, those little meek folks. It really means people that are simple, willing to ask God for guidance. It's like saying, blessed are the children. Blessed are the meek. Blessed are the ones that recognize their healthy dependence on their Creator. And God's not looking for automatons. That's not what it means by saying we're going to be humble before God. It means we're actually raised into being equals to God after we learn to be humble enough to bow our egos to the earth and say goodbye to that part of ourselves. So it's quite beautiful and quite amazing if you think about it. And on that note, the religions seem to compete, and some want to say we're lowly sinners. That's not the same kind of thing as humility. Others want to lift us up as the statement, I am God. And those are usually grandiose in their intention and in their effect. Without realizing it, that's what they're doing. Again, if you're going to ever say, I am God, and there are teachers and teachings that, profess those kinds of things, those beings don't even understand what they're teaching. They're only of a limited certain level of consciousness. I don't care if they're 18th dimensional, they're not infinitely conscious. They're only 18th. Well, 18th is far greater than third, isn't it? So presuming there's an 18th dimension, we're using that as our example, it still means they're of dimensionality. So there's still a limit to their consciousness. I don't care who the being says they are, what experience, what skills they have. In my life, I've had some interesting things that I've had to learn as a spiritual teacher. And some of them are that miracle working, healings, miraculous healings, and intuition and predictions and so on and so on. There's a lot of things I've done. But I noticed many years ago, students would get so serious about it. I would attract students because they would hear about miracles. So they would come and watch me or attend lectures because of these things people would say happen. Michael can say, abracadabra, and the rain would stop. And it's true, we've had all those kinds of things happen before, which I know sounds boastful, but it won't end in that position. But what I started doing is realizing people are coming for that. So I stopped doing that. I made sure that I didn't do that. It was like I wanted to say, if you're not here to learn, then I'm not interested in doing anything. And I think that's likely some of Jesus's reasons for backing off at times and not performing miracles when people said, show us a sign, show us a sign. It's the wrong reasons for people to be there. So in my own clumsy way, I had to navigate that. And there's times with friends as they became closer, students that became friends. There's lots of times I did things that were, wonderfully supernatural. And I'm saying that again, trust me, it's not to boast. They're wonderfully supernatural. They're things that I believe we can all do. Edgar Cayce did miraculous things people typically couldn't do. But he didn't get caught up in it because you realize when you do those things, they're challenging in your own life. If you're Nostradamus, and you're predicting things, Everybody's watching for you to make a mistake. It can be very challenging. If you say, I'm predicting this, but if the folks would make a change in their lives, this won't happen to that town or that person or that city or whatever it is. So then when it doesn't happen because somebody made the right changes, it looks like he failed in his prophecy. If it does happen, it doesn't make anybody happy. They've just become afraid of you. So whether you're in the area, you're gifted as a psychic or clairvoyant or whatever, it gets very challenging. People often are testing you. So what I started doing was to deal with the not wanting it to become grandiose or ego-centered. I just learned to start making it playful. And sometimes because I'd make it playful, meaning we'd play games and I would intuit things to show things, but making it laughable, make mistakes too, and blend in. It's kind of like running a race with a child and letting them win. I always felt that helped for people to not take the miraculous stuff so seriously, and that's one way that I felt like it helped kind of keep me grounded and kind of in a state of humility. I just would play a little bit. So there's times I would use tricks or playful games or being a little mischievous, and those kinds of things. But after a while, I realized that's not actually helping either, because some of the folks wouldn't understand. They would think spiritual teacher shouldn't be doing that. So even if you're a spiritual teacher, dealing with this is really an interesting thing to deal with. But not just a spiritual teacher. A parent is supposed to look a certain way to their children. So is it narcissistic for them to look like they have it all together all the time? Or is it humble? Or it's hard to navigate that. To be a parent, to be the school teacher in the room and have it together when you get bad news and not let the kids see you having a bad day. Or you have an error going wrong with your wardrobe and the kids will never forget it. It's like that. We're on this planet and we're navigating all this, and we're trying to be looking good to the kids if you have children, or to your classroom, or to your students if you're a spiritual teacher, and so on and so on and so on. And what ends up happening, at least for me, is even in those years of being really capable of doing this and that, and still being capable of doing this and that, I'm grateful that those skills were there. I'm grateful that if it ever worked for anybody, me as a counselor today, people call me, Michael, what will happen if I do this and that? I can tell them with pretty good accuracy, right? That's what I'm known for. Teaching, counseling, just channeling these things. I'm not going to be falsely humble and say, gosh, I don't know where it comes from. I'll say, it's God, man. It's God. That's not grandiosity to say it's God. It sounds like boasting that it's God, but it isn't. It's humility. What I do know is I of myself am nothing. And we, all good artists, teachers should be able to say that, because we of our ego selves really are nothing. But in all my years of juggling this, and how much should I, let people see? I'm really grateful that for many years in my life, here and there, off and on, I've had friends that I could trust to allow me to do those things even more so. And there's times when I think that when their head got in the way, they started doubting and going, I don't think he could really be doing this. So I would either stop doing it around them, which then bothered a lot of those kinds of folks, because they sort of shut themselves out. Or sometimes I would do some things to just help their faith to realize that I did or could do that. But I did mix it up with mischievous and playful and that and this and that, because that was my way of keeping it kind of light. Just like when I make jokes sometimes when I'm talking, it's my way of kind of being human and keeping things light. Just messing around a little bit. But it's also very important because it shakes people's minds off of focusing on me. When I crack a joke, and it's never timed, it's never planned, but I know that when it happens, there's different reasons for it, and one of them is people start leaning forward, going, "Wow, listen to what he's saying. It's deep. It's powerful. Wow." Then I say something, silly, and they crack up. Now, some people say that broke the moment because they were really into what I was saying. That's what I want to happen. That's what I think is supposed to be happening. That's why it comes through that way, to help people go back to themselves instead of leaning too far into, listen to how amazing this guy is. We laugh, and when you laugh, see, you're backing yourself laughing. You're not laughing, leaning forward and hooked into the person. You immediately lean back and kind of laugh. It makes you shift back into yourself, and that's symbolic of you getting back into your own power. So it sort of grounds whatever we've been talking about. So I hope all that's making sense. But we have to find our ways, whether you're a great, musician or whatever you're good at, to be able to maintain that humility, to be able to say, I know how to do music, I know how to write songs, but instead of I know how, just every day to be able to still say, God, show me, guide me. And I think that that's what has helped me. Instead of saying, I've heard that I'm an amazing, there's an old saying, you start believing your own press. I can say, well, I've heard that I'm an amazing healer, so I might as well just keep doing what I'm doing, and I don't need any spiritual intervention or help. And I don't buy that. I believe it's helpful for me to every day still say, help me with this one, guide me with this one. Because again, even if you're a brilliant human being, you're still limited on how much you'll know. It's just nature. But when we surrender, you're actually surrendering to the unlimited. So become the unlimited parent, become the unlimited everything. And in that, it's not grandiose, it's humble, because you're only getting it from something else called God, something greater than our little selves. Remember that when you struggle with addiction, please remember, you can't do this of yourself. I can't do this on my own. I'm going to need some intervention. I'm going to need some help. When you try to forgive, think about it. Why don't you ask Spirit to help you recognize what forgiveness is about instead of trying to pull that off on your own? I know some of the things that I could describe are mundane, like how to cook, how to make a bowl of cereal. You pour it in the bowl, you pour the milk. I know it sounds silly, and you don't have to name each item specifically in your life. I'm now going to walk across the room, but Lord, show me how. I'm going to tie my shoes. God, show me how. What I mean is just generally start the day with that concept, that consciousness, because it ties you into the Holy Spirit, Divine Mother, as your guide for the day. And then, yes, if there's specific times of struggle or whatever going on in life, recenter and ask again if you can remember to do so. But just keep these things in mind. Hopefully this has helped sort of split apart any confusion about teachers and ourselves, students as well, with all this. But religions have taught us false humility, that we're mere sinners. That's not the case. Other religions have taught us that we are God. That's not the case. Not the one who's claiming to be God anyway. But everything has its place. So when you hear me say something about some thought systems and some teachings, and I'm seemingly irreverent, I'm never really hating, hurting, judging those people. I think everything has a place in the third dimensional illusion. It all has its place. I believe that it's like saying that, what if I'm studying anything related to Judaism? Then basically you're studying the mental chakra, the fire center, solar plexus, that fire center. And it doesn't matter if you agree on the attributes of each chakra. I'm just saying it's a metaphor, the mind chakra, because it's about law. And I'm not saying it's only law, it's about faith and so on, but it's about the laws. The fire religions, Islam and Judaism and so on, those are fire religion. Zoroastrianism, fire religions. They have a place, law and focus and willpower, the tremendous willpower and faith. There's water religions, Christianity, the emotional center, the second chakra, or whatever you want to believe it is, the emotional chakra. Christianity, such emotionally based. This has nothing to do with Jesus. It's Paulism, as some people call it. The Christianity taught by Paul and some of the apostles. It's really, and the televangelists, they're so emotional and working on getting kind of sappy sometimes with emotion to get you sucked into your guilt, your shames, repentance. Very emotional religion, but it has its place, just like the fire religions. they have their sincerity. They have when it's turned proper, it's deeply devotional. Devotional, which is healthy emotional. Okay? It's devout emotional. And the physical root religions, the earth religions, they have their place. So the religions that think I'm better than another, which is false, it's grandiosity again, they're all the same. They're all just four chakras. Some earth religions are, they're beautiful, but, some are caught up in the earth being what you talk to, worship, etc., even if it's just a rock. And others understand that it's the spirit you'll find behind everything. So it isn't the dense substance you're talking to, communing with, worshiping, or whatever. It's the life within it, deep within it. It's the light within it. So earth religions have their place because, oh my gosh, it grounds us. The earth religion will get you to walk on the earth instead of floating in the stars. There's the heart-centered religion, like, there are less of those than there are the other centers, but the heart religion, Buddhism, for example. Compassion, forgiveness, very heart-centered. So in that sense, Buddhism is higher in terms of it being more subtle or sublime. So beautiful, so detached from the world. You're up in the heart, detached from the world and be all loving and gentle and compassionate. And that has its place. But a lot of people in that system, those kinds of systems, air-type thought systems, are very detached and not grounded, and sometimes proving themselves to be somewhat worthless. Just airheaded in a sense, air religions. So every religion, every chakra can have its perks and its pitfalls depending on how it's used. However, Christ consciousness is none of those four centers. It is of the upper three centers. It's of the divine, because that's what we are, ultimately divine. That's why Christ consciousness is the solution. Us learning to wear the mind of Christ, as it says in the New Testament. Put on the mind of Christ, or, like Jesus saying, what I've accomplished, you'll do and more, meaning you get this consciousness and you'll live in a time when you can apply even more than I'm able to apply around these people of 2,000 years ago. So that is our destiny, is our divine remembrance. And that's Christ consciousness. So it's quite beautiful if you think about it. Everything has its place. So when I, act sort of irreverent about these things, I'm laughing at the parts that are messed up, the parts that are stuck, the parts that are misused. But I admire something about every one of those traditions. In fact, every one of those traditions are me. They are you. They're in every one of us. We don't nurture the positive aspects of every one of them. Instead, we usually, if we're into religion, we identify with one or another religion and often get sucked into the negative aspects of that religion. One of those religions has too much entitlement. One of them has too much guilt and shame they push, and so on and so on. Instead, I don't want to get caught in that. What I want is to synthesize the best aspects of each of those, and then, even then, rise above that, from the doings to the beings, right? The being moment. So hopefully that makes sense, that even in religion, the comparing and the competing, there's that grandiosity, but there's something so beautiful that before any of this existed and after it's all ceased to exist, once it ceases to exist, we are what we began as, and that is holy, pure, perfect children of God, which is also known as the Christ. So Christ consciousness is not to be compared to or competed with other religions because it's the God consciousness. It's not a religion. So hopefully that distinction is understood. I want to come to a close now. And in doing so, I want to share with you that, this time of the year is a good time to assess who we are. So take time if you can. I have my Co-Creating a New Life course that begins every January. Join us, don't join us, it's up to you. But whether you do or not, please take time to assess what you're about. Assess who you are, where you're coming from. Assess your health, your finances, your relationships, your work. Assess 0 to 10 scale. How am I doing? And anything that you're rating below a 7 on, you should really rethink. And don't lie to yourself when you're doing it. Try to be really honest about the overall rating you would give yourself. If you want to join us for the course, it's starting up immediately. You know, it'll be within a week, so just watch. They'll be posting ads about it, so I don't want to detract from what I shared here, but just a quick note on that. You know, you're welcome to join us in that, okay? And also that you can still get a discount if you check it out. If you get signed up soon, that would be great. And have a little note here to remind myself to share with you. If you miss the beginning or any part of the course, you can still watch the tapes of it because they're kept in the group. And it's a private group once the course starts. So if you miss a class, it doesn't matter. Any one of them or all of them, you can still watch them after in case the time zone isn't right for you. I know some people had asked about that. And this kind of a course that we're going to do is not just kind of a improve your life, law of attraction kind of a thing. If it's like that at all, imagine that with God involved instead of just your mind, the power of your grandiose mind, creating cool things for yourself. It involves God. That's a really cool piece. It involves forgiveness. So there's things in the course that reflect us back to the topic of tonight, humility, rather than the grandiosity we learn so often in New Thought studies. And this may not resonate with you. You may say, no, I like the grandiosity, man. Then stay with that and you know, study that kind of stuff and keep using, you know, your mind and improving your life. It's just different because it doesn't bring with it the consciousness. It only brings you some results. So keep that in mind. And you know, whatever areas you rate low, in this kind of course we're going to do, the whole idea is not just to raise the volume, the number on our areas. You rate a 5 and a 4 and a 6, and they're all going to be 8s and 9s. That is what's going to happen, and it's fantastic. But it's also about having a balanced life, not an area that's leaking and weak, an area that's drained, that's procrastinated. It's about stepping up and becoming more like masters. Ascended masters are not caught up in the earth plane stuff. So you become an ascended master, not because you're completely Christed. You become a master more or less when you can see through the stuff of this world. And even the spiritual teachers that take the world too seriously, they believe in the power of the world over us. They can have great teachings, but they're just not done, and they'll have to keep incarnating. Some of the patriarchs of the Bible still incarnated afterwards because they understood some things, but they didn't crack open the whole mystery. They you know, like even Buddha becomes an ascended master at that time. Doesn't mean he can't incarnate again, but he becomes an ascended master because he says, I get the joke. You know, this is a scheme here. The ego has made us believe that we're victims of a world we see, and we are not. So waking up like that is what really does it. It's not how many books you read or you know, what you think of yourself in terms of your, you know, your ego. It's more the humility, so that we say, in my humility, it's almost like saying, in my humility, I don't really know anything. All of a sudden, everything is revealed. When you say, I don't know anything, then everything is revealed. It's the most beautiful thing. And that's partly what it meant by the last shall be first. When we sort of say, I don't know, all of a sudden, I know. And so I'm glad that to this day, I can do lectures and so forth, and people say, well, how do you do the talks without rehearsing and having you know, always notes and that sort of thing? When I have notes, they're like this usually. They're a reminder to mention something or an ad, because when I rely on my memory, it's not so good, you know, so easy. So I use notes to remind myself of things. But with talks, I only started writing notes of what I'm about to talk about, and so I could keep those and utilize those in a book or something later on. But I don't use them per se when I'm talking, if I write them at all. And that's because I just kind of say, here I am, and then it happens. I blend God with my own self as a channel with what the people watching or listening happen to be looking for. And so there's this beautiful dance between all of us spiritually, and it manifests as a talk. And so I'm closing tonight with the reminder, those of you who have been participating, and if not, you can look it up, we'll post it. We've been doing the 12 Days and Nights of Christmas, which is a esoteric personal study and development. Fantastic. Starts with Virgo on the morning of Christmas Day, and you move on through, and we're now approaching the last with Leo. So it's a great way to close this 12 Days, Nights, Christmas with Leo, because it means the significance of each sign of the zodiac for these 12 days that we've been going through here, which then affect the next 12 months of our life, 1 day per 1 month, right? So we close with Leo in this case because, and it's so perfect, because Leo means I'm not the king. I will wear the crown of God as my guide, and that's what makes me a great king. A great Leo is not going to be self-made. The great Leo surrenders and wears the crown of God, or the crown of Christ consciousness. So hopefully that kind of helped tie all this together, the necessity of humility, the necessity of, tying in the 12 days, nights of Christmas, and the course that we're going to be doing, co-creating a new life. I wish you many, many blessings. I wish you a great new life, a great new year. But please, with my system or not, with my study or not, please make it a concerted effort to say, this year is not going to be the same as my previous life, previous years. And if nothing else, just start every day saying, you know what, God, if you never watch another thing or read another book on spirituality, you and God, just do it. Just connect and say, here I am, be my guide now. And invite the Divine Mother, the Universal Mother, the Holy Spirit to be your teacher, your guide, or the presence of God to be your guide. It'll happen, it'll work, and it'll guide you through what you need as long as you believe in that, okay? It'll work. Many blessings, all right? Peace be with you all, and hope to connect with you soon. Bye-bye.